All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of SNX Radio. I'm Coley, also known as ColeyUFO, and today is Thursday, so we are doing a collab with Jay Austin. We got a very exciting guest. So how you doing today, Jay?
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I just wondered how you're doing today. You doing good?
Yeah, really well, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing well. So we're gonna probably bump Thursdays up on the date. I had not realized. I guess I did realize, but I heard you talking and like the last show when it's 6 o'clock here, it's midnight there, and it really pushes it. So it'd be good to do a Thursday show. Anyway, I'd love to get more of the UK involved, and really, I think it's awesome. So yeah, we can kind of figure that out too. So I just want to start really quick before I hand this over to Jay and continue doing what I'm doing. I just want to say hello to everybody in chat. Dragonbone, great to see you, Pops. Pops is doing, he's monitoring the chat. He's also taken on, he's the manager, content manager, and he's starting to do some producer stuff. So yes, he's learning, and I really appreciate everything you're doing, Pop. So Denise, great to see you. Trooper 22 Cat, it's great to see you. Laura Ladd is in the house. Valdo, awesome that you're here. Great to see everybody. I know it's a little bit earlier than what we're used to, but this will be awesome. This will absolutely be awesome. And we got GC in the house, Gary Carpenter, Benno from Oz. Oh, Benno, this will probably be a better time for you too, for our Thunder Down Under down in the yes. Then let me see here. I know it's kind of popping quick here, so I just want to make sure that I say hello to everybody. Chris, great to see you and welcome. It's nice to see a bunch of new faces, and Skidder, great, and welcome back. So as everybody kind of comes on in, I'll catch you in chat and say hello, but I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Jay so he can introduce our guest for today.
Well. Very excited about tonight's guest. Someone I'm generally honoured to call not only a colleague within his field, but a close personal friend, a man I've known and respected for many years. Someone whose work has profoundly influenced the way I think about the phenomenon and the mysteries that surround us. Joining me tonight is researcher, investigator, author, and documentary filmmaker Paul Sinclair. For those unfamiliar with his work, Paul has spent decades investigating some of Britain's strangest and most compelling unexplained cases. From UFOs and UAPs to cryptids, missing people, anomalous lights, black cats, ancient folklore, and high strangeness encounters concentrated around the East Yorkshire coastline and beyond. He's widely recognised for his groundbreaking research into what many now refer to as Britain's own paranormal hotspot, areas where witness testimony, folklore, military history, and unexplained phenomena seem to collide in deeply unsettling ways. Paul is the creator of the respected research platform Truth Proof and the author of multiple acclaimed books exploring the unexplained. His investigations have reached audiences worldwide through documentaries, podcasts, radio appearances, and television features, including the remarkable documentary Wolflands, which explores chilling witness accounts involving what some describe as werewolves, Dogmen-type entities, or unexplained cryptid phenomenon lurking within the British landscape. But beyond the accolades and the years of research, Paul is someone I personally look up to immensely. In many ways, he's been a mentor and a teacher to me when it comes to understanding the phenomenon. Someone who approaches these mysteries not with sensationalism, but with patience, integrity, and genuine curiosity. What makes Paul stand apart is that he doesn't simply collect stories, he studies patterns, geography, human experience, consciousness, folklore, the overlap between UFO phenomenon, cryptid encounters, and the psychological impact these events leave behind on ordinary people. And tonight, we're going deep into it all. Paul, my friend, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Jay. That was really kind of you. Everything was true, of course. I'm only joking. No, really
pay me later.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you. And great to be here. Honestly, really, really good. I'm honoured to be here. So let's kick it in any direction you guys want to go. And we'll. I can only tell you what's inside here. And sometimes there's nothing, but we shall we shall explore.
You're brilliant. One of the best. I guess my opening question to you would be, so you've investigated UFOs, cryptids, missing people in strange lights for years. At what point did you stop treating these as separate phenomenon and start suspecting they may all be connected as well?
I had a website back in 2002 called ILF UFO, Intelligent Light Forms.
Okay.
Basically, similar to what I'm doing now with the Truth Proof website, and just collecting reports. But you primarily it were UFO related because of my experiences in childhood, and the night people.
Yeah.
So that's the path that I was on, Jay. But when you get these reports in, and you get a report, somebody tells you something they've seen, UFO related, alien related, and then they come out with something else that doesn't quite fit the box that we all expect the UFO, because that's the narrative has always been. Cryptid researchers research that type of phenomena, that genre, and UFO researchers research UFOs, and never the two will meet.
It's everything segregated.
But there's threads of the same running through it all. And the light form phenomena, Jay and Coley, it runs through all genres of the unexplained. If you're into ghost hunting, I mean, it's not my thing really, but I have full respect to people that are. They call it ghost hunting. I don't know, whatever the term is. But if you're into ghosts and the spirits, and people report seeing spheres of light, orbs, and the like. Cryptid researchers talk about people seeing Bigfoot and other types of cryptids, not just in the deep forests of the United States and in Alaska, but in the UK, all parts of the world. But occasionally, or more than occasionally, you'll get reports of spheres of light seen in and around the cryptid sightings. Not necessarily accompanying them, but days before. So the thread of the same runs through it all. The threads of the sameness run through everything. Think about the mind speak.
Okay.
So the alien abduction scenario. How many times have we heard people that claim to have been abducted by aliens, and they say that they're immobilized essentially, either in their own beds or somewhere that it's totally alien, pardon the pun, to what they know and understand. But they talk about these beings not audibly speaking to them, but speaking to them in the mind. Then think about the clairvoyant and clairaudience. A million miles away from the researcher, the UFO researcher and the alien abduction, but they're hearing voices. They're receiving messages.
Right.
To me, now I don't think any of them are wrong. I don't think that we've got to say, they've got it all wrong. But it's the same principles that are at work, even with the Bigfoot scenario. And you hear of stories such as the hunters who've worked the forests for years, 20, 30 years, and these things don't exist. What a load of rubbish. I've been in these forests, I know them inside out, and then that particular day, that fateful day when they actually come face to face with one of these things, and he's got his gun, the 30-yard 6 or something like that, and raises the gun. This thing knows, and he gets a voice in his head kind of advising him not to do it. It's the same exotic science. It's the same thread that's running through all of the phenomena. That's why I think it's linked. I'm not saying I know the mechanics of why it's linked, because I really don't. But and you'll get people on here and on my podcast, and they'll tell you that they know.
Yeah.
They don't. I don't know anybody.
I don't think any of us do, buddy.
But never take yourself too seriously, and always sort of leave a door open, because once you've closed it and said this is what it is, you kind of you're labelled with that. You're in that box.
I completely agree.
So sorry for ranting.
No, it's all good. Do you think the phenomenon adapts itself to the cultural expectations of the witness?
Absolutely.
Like medieval people saw demons and fairies. Modern people are now seeing or what we call drones and UAP.
Absolutely. The phenomena has morphed and adapted as we've evolved as a species, as cultures, different cultures throughout the world. It's a shame. Different religions. Some people would say that everything that we're dealing with is the jinn.
Yeah,
I don't think these people are wrong. I just wish that they would be a little bit more open to the idea that, you know, we're only using words. They're only words for the same thing.
It's just different translations, isn't it?
And it uses this, guys. The phenomenon is, it's a shame that we've got to call it that. But I think over time, as the years progress, I mean, we're doing it now. We'll have to find new words and a new vocabulary, because some of this, it's almost like you can't imagine that there's a new taste or a new color. But when you're involved in the abduction scenario, there's nothing. It's unique. I've got no words to describe what happened to me in childhood. I've got no words to describe the way that they made me feel and the fear that they evoked. And I don't think we're at that point where we've got the vocabulary and we've got the unique words that, because at the moment we're using things that fit into our world and the things that are happening, the things that are coming to us and with these visitations that we're having, be it cryptid related, UFO related, the not of our world, or they are, but be it temporary. Yeah. It's like the people that think that they're coming from the distant galaxies. I'm not saying that they're not, but it's clear.
Maybe that's just one component.
One component, Jay. Yeah. I think that these unknown others, which are alien essentially, but alien to everything we know and understand as being normal. The unknown others, they've got the ability to come here at will. It seems that they can just slip in and out of our existence whenever they want. So I think gone are the days when we used to get beaten down by science by saying, well, look at the vastness of the universe. Nothing, physics would not allow. It's just not there for them to traverse these vast distances. Yeah, just disregard it, because either everybody that's reporting these things are liars or they're doing it. And I'm sorry, but if science has not caught up to that, and I'm far from a scientist, by the way, but it's clear to me it doesn't take a great intellect to understand that if people are reporting these incursions into people's lives, into our airspace, they're either traveling from vast distances and have cracked some other form of physics that we've not reached or attained yet, or they're already here. You know, it's hard, isn't it? I don't have the answers, but
no. I guess my next question is, obviously there's been comparisons made in the past. I've seen them to UK Skinwalker Ranch. Obviously, Skinwalker Ranch is now in the mainstream. It's out in the ether. What year was it that you sort of started looking into this and it became more of like an acknowledgement to you started researching this?
Well, an actual year, we'd have to go back to childhood, but we'll get to where you are in a moment. Yeah, because it's always been there. Always been there, because when you've had the experiences, you're searching forever. Yeah, you can't stop searching. You lay down in bed on a night and you're thinking about it and trying to work forward a little bit further, and I can't do. I've never have done. However, I would think 2004, myself and a guy called Chris Short. I mean, I'm only 5'6". Short is 6'6". 6'5". So there you go, Shorty. We're driving home from a place called from York here in UK. We'd been doing some student accommodation, Joseph Roundtree Trust. Why I had all these little bits, Coley, I don't know, but as it comes into me head, they come out. So we're driving home. We're at a place called Sledmere, a little village, and we're just driving up this incline to get onto what's called the Wolds, which is essentially it's dialect for the wilds. It's barren land, vast areas of barren land. There's a little wood just on our right-hand side, and above the wood, there is a tube above the trees. It's quite big. It looks like the fuselage of an aircraft without wings. It's just there, stationary. Because Short is, I stopped the van, and he's going, what is it? I can hear him now saying, is it one of them UFO thingies? His exact words. I said, Shorty, you can see it. Don't tell me you've not seen this at work tomorrow, and we'll come to that in a moment, why I say that. And we're looking at it. We get out of the van. We're watching this thing. We can't hear it. We can feel it. And I know that your original question, we're still going to go to it. And it's pulsing. It's pulsing, and you can feel this thing. Get to work the next day. Shorty's all over it. He's talking about it. He's really excited. Over the probably about a week to 2 weeks, that dissipated. I didn't want to talk about it. And that happens with a lot of people. It really does. But when we'd seen that and we spoke about it, although all of this was in my mind because I'd been putting stuff out that's prolifically on the internet. It was National UFO Reporting Centre, and I can't remember other site. That's when Whitley Strieber in 2006 reached out to me. I'm really grateful for him for that because we've all stayed in touch and become good friends. However, that's when I started doing a lot more research. And a farmer contacted me who lived on the Wolds. He lived at the back of RAF Staxton Wold, which is, as I think I've told you before, Jay, it's the oldest operational RAF base in the world. Yeah. And it's still manned, be it lightly, and I think it works as a satellite base for Fylingdales, which is one of the big main radar bases. So this farmer was so enthused by the UFO phenomena, he'd got cameras on cams in the upstairs windows of all of his rooms, filming big hard drives, filming day and night, looking for the anomalous phenomena. So he told me about it. We started going on the Wolds, which would be about 12 miles from the cliff tops of East and North Yorkshire. Yeah. Sure enough, we're filming these objects. We're filming mostly the light forms, red spheres of light, orange spheres of light, one light punching into 5. And then suddenly you'd look towards the coast because you've got a really good vantage point where we were on the Wolds there. And they'd be over towards Flamborough and Bempton. And we were spending a lot of time there, myself and Steve Ashbridge. I would have thought from 2004 up until about 2009. And things started to peter out. But I'd already started immersing myself in archives, literally going through microfilm machines and going through newspapers right from late 1800s right through to present day. I've done years and years of them, lots of archives. And it formed a pattern that there was a lot of activity over the sea, over the East and North Yorkshire coast. And so then I got into lifeboat stations and so befriended a few lifeboat men who'd let me look at their logs. And this is the time when these logs were paper. Now it's digitized. You can't get to them because it's all compartmentalized. You just can't get into them. Yeah. So, but what those logs revealed were sightings. It'd say false alarm with good intent. And I don't mean lots. I don't mean like there's one every week. But when you open a lifeboat log for a year, you would find quite a few of these in all of the years. Yeah. And what it revealed, though, when you started looking at lots of logs from different agencies, say, and I'm going to say locations here, Coley, that I know they're not going to mean a lot to you guys, overseas, but you'd do Bridlington, Whitby, all close locations, Scarborough, Filey, and you'd see that multiple lifeboats had been sent out on the same nights a lot of the time to look for a boat in distress or a potential aircraft that's come down because people had reported it, not just members of the public, police officers, Coast Guard, seeing anomalous lights. So they naturally assume that these are flares or there's a boat in distress or a plane in distress. Some of the call-outs range from 4 hours to 9 hours. Multiple agencies. This were costing a lot of money. And at the end of it, they found nothing. And they'd put false alarm with good intent. Now, and I would say there'll be a different terminology overseas, but I bet you if people get into archives there, if they can, or get access to all lifeboat logs and Coast Guard logs, they'll find a similar pattern. There's a wealth of information there. And where did we go with that question at the start? You were asking me how I got into it, weren't you? Yeah. So that's what led me down that path, basically, Jay.
Okay. It's interesting that you mentioned obviously about some of the plane incidents that have been over the North Sea there. I know one that you covered on your I think it was your first documentary, Bringing Down the Light, with the tall guy with the tattoos on his face. Can you tell our viewers about or listeners about that?
Yeah, I can tell you a bit about it. I'll tell you why I only say a bit. I think not just me, everybody. People want to over-sensationalize things, rather than be respectful. And I don't mean you guys. You're not saying anything disrespectful. Rather than be respectful to the people involved, because an aircraft's gone down. Let's not forget that's somebody's son, somebody's husband, somebody's father, or female counterpart. So I'm always very, very careful when I talk about these things. And I've researched a lot of these really deep. I mean, the aircraft that you're on about is ZA610, which went down on, December the 12th, 1985. Over the North Sea, and Tom Quinn, who's a friend of mine, a trawlerman, he knew that. He said when we went to work that morning, out to sea, he says the placard, there's a board outside, news agents, and it said tornado down. He says, and I thought, oh right, he says they roughly knew where it may have gone down. He thought we'll be fishing that area, so they're fishing. They're in a trawler called the Betty. Which will make sense. I'll come to that again in a moment. And whatever time they're fishing, that morning they dropped their nets. He said, and we hit the aircraft. He said the trawler. He said if we thought we were going to pull back end at trawler off. He says, and we looked on our graph, and it had mapped out this shade, the dark shade, and he said we were on the aircraft, So so they retrieved this unfortunate navigator from the aircraft, and before they radioed in that they'd found it, and there are a lot of strange things surrounding ZA610, not necessarily UFO related, but strange things surrounding it, such as and I've got the word of the man who helped retrieve the navigator, and he said to me when it was HMS Brecon that came alongside first. He said because he was on the back of the boat in the ejector seat, I was trying to free him from the seat. Obviously, this poor man's passed away, and they're all waving. He says, "No, I didn't realise why." And when they got alongside, they said, "He's not discharged the." The seat's not discharged. There's enough explosive to blow the back of the trawler off. But loads and loads of bits. They had a catch. They called them queenies, some shellfish. They all went over side because they were, according to Tom, they were potentially radioactive. So it's fascinating, a fascinating story. And to be honest with you, if I'd have thought we were going to be talking about it, we could have done an hour and a half on. For simple reason that they found that aircraft. I'm sure they found it. I wish I could remember exact date, but when they found the aircraft, the Scarborough Evening News had already said that the aircraft had been found. So it went down on the 12th. I think they found it. They unfortunately found the aircraft a few days after, but in between times they said that it had been found, and it had been found using underwater cameras and sonar, and divers had been down and they'd found it. Well, obviously they'd not found it because it got found a few days after. I wish I could, if I'd have got the information in front of me, you know what I mean, we'd have done this. So that had to be retracted. I'm not saying that there's anything untoward there, but that was the way of things.
Well, the thing that always stood out for me about that case was how they advised Tom that if he started having nosebleeds, if he was vomiting, hair falling out, they should go straight to hospital.
Yeah, they did. Because and it makes you wonder what levels of radiation, and maybe look at the world we're in today, Jay, health and safety and everything. It could have just been their terminology. We're all keen. I'm as keen as anybody to find out the mysteries and look into the true unexplained events, but it could just have been the terminology. I don't want to water it down, but that could have just been the terminology to I don't know, a double insurance policy to make this man realize that he's just got to be aware of everything.
No, I totally get that. There was another story that always stands out with you talking about these light forms that have some sort of intelligence to them. And it was the lady that was driving back that saw the herd of deer in the middle of the street. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think it was 2007. Once again, there's a lady driving back home from, I think she'd been to a place called Driffield, and she's driving across the Wolds, which we've just been speaking about. And she's driving to a little village called Hugate. And as she's driving little country roads, they're very narrow, odd places you've got pull-ins, and she could see orange lights in the distance moving about, like football-sized orange lights. Lovely lady, Elaine, they call this woman. I had quite a few conversations with her, and she's driving along. She's quite puzzled by what she's looking at. She's because they're not very high. They're only, about 30 feet in the air. They're not very high at all. And as she rounds a corner, she can see, I'm loath to call it a herd of deer, but there's a group of roe deer. Obviously, there's a wild, I don't know, 10 to 15 roe deer, and they're in the road. And they're looking confused. They're not really frightened that she's around. It's almost though she said they seemed a little bit nullified and confused. And these spheres of light are over the deer.
Yeah.
Like you said, we covered this in Bringing Down the Light. And she swerved off the road to miss them and went through an edge and ended up going down. There's a lot of steep embankments and valleys down there. And the car just sort of went down. Got it wedged between two trees. She had to crawl out of the back of the car. She couldn't get out. But she said when she looked round, the lights were coming down the field. She believes that she believes that she were only probably about 10 to 15 minutes away from home, even if she were on foot. But I think it took her a couple of hours to get home. She can't quite account for what happened. So. A
mobile phone battery was also
a mobile phone had gone completely flat as well. So a lot of anomalies.
It's crazy the activity you've had out there, and obviously, I've been out there myself and wild camped in Danesdyke Woods. Can you just talk about some of the weird encounters that have centralized around Danesdyke?
Yeah, absolutely. And and I were in there other night, and a guy called Michael Pennock, he slept in there, and he told me we were coming down last minute. So I went and spent about 3 hours with him, just until it was nightfall. And first of all, folklore in Danesdyke reports of a white lady, and that goes back hundreds and hundreds of years. But when you actually boil it down, it's a sphere of light. In folklore, I can't sort of go back and speak to those people and they talk about a white lady, but I've spoke to people in present day who say, I've seen the white lady of Danesdyke. Yeah, saw it. Yeah. So, well, what did you see? And so, well, we saw a sphere of light moving through the trees, and they've just interpreted it as the ghost of the white lady. And we'll stay in Danesdyke temporarily, but we'll just jump to Clifftops. On the Clifftops at Bempton, then we'll go to Danesdyke. The rock anglers who stand on those cliff tops fishing during the winter months talk about the ghost of big railings. And when you boil it down, because they say it's the ghost of a deceased fisherman, it's a sphere of light. They say, well, we can see his headlight as he's moving about. And so same thing. I'm not saying that people don't see ghostly apparitions. Obviously people do. But Danesdyke, it's a strange one because there's cryptid reports in Danesdyke, and it seems to be getting stronger. And I was thinking about thought forms, tulpas. And what if, this is only a what if, let's just play with idea. What if we're creating some of the phenomena? What if Coley, what if Jay thinks about something with loads and loads of intent and intention, and you actually create a thought form, and then other people gravitate to going to this? And is it bound to the location? We're only playing with the idea, because some people will be saying, turn him off. But we're only playing with the idea. But is it bound to the location? And does the thought form become a stronger force? Does it take on more substance the more people concentrate thought on it? I think
I agree.
You agree?
Yeah, I actually have a whole idea behind this. I think we're the ones that are making this stranger and stranger, right, Paul? So I thought, what if we did what I call an inversion, where at each show, instead of taking this and making it maybe a little bit more stranger, since we are creators, that we try and kind of invert it into a different reality, especially with AI. But I'm on the same page. Thank you for bringing that forward.
There's a lot to be said for it, and you talked about, we'll stay with Danesdyke, but you talked about the Fae in folklore earlier. You touched on were the Fae and other types of things described in folklore, were they the old-fashioned aliens, the old-fashioned parts of the phenomena, and now today we're calling them the NHIs and the aliens, and we've gravitated to that. Well, what about the Fae? What if the Fae have never moved? What if they are a real living nature spirit that's present in all parts of the world. But, you know, different cultures just call them different things. So what would you do? There's a beautiful bit of woodland called Danes Dyke, and people are claiming to see things that would be described as a werewolf or a dogman. But you also got people coming in who are littering it up, playing loud music at night, letting the dogs do what they want all over the area, leaving the litter. Now, if you're a nature spirit that's been in this ancient woodland, there's an earthwork at Coley at Danes Dyke. It's Neolithic, so it's 3,500 to 4,000 years old. It's 2.5 miles long, and it cuts Flamborough Head off the peninsula, and that's part of Danes Dyke. So you can see how old it is, this land. And so where am I going with this? So the Fae are there. Let's assume. What would you... And they can morph and change and present as different things. I think if I wanted to get something out of the woodland, and I could do that, I would present as something like a werewolf or a dogman, because nothing would get me out of the woodland quicker than seeing something like that morphed into that. I know these are all... they're only ideas, and we're just kicking things around, and there are going to be people watching this who are into the UFO phenomena and genuinely fixed on the nuts and bolts. I can tap it on the side, and that's what it is. I'm not discounting that. I'm not discounting that. But there's a whole lot more besides connected to this genre, this great unexplained that we're all immersed in. Okay.
Are there any, because I know we've talked about, you know, the light formations are there, but it's also important to note that, you know, I've seen you interview some of the rock anglers that have seen structured craft appear close to what is known as RAF Bempton.
Yeah, that's right. So, we'll touch on some of the reports in Danes Dyke in a moment. But that's a guy called Mick Sigson, and Mick is keen to tell you he's fished the cliff tops for 50 years. You know, he's in his 70s. And Coley, when I say cliff tops, these cliffs range between 200 and 420 feet. And they are sheer. Yeah. And you can't get down. There's water below the cliffs most of the year, you know, even at extremely low tides. And they stand on the top and fish. So it's almost, well, I'll not say the word, but it's life ending. You know, they're really on edge of cliff.
Sounds like it.
So on this particular night in November 1998, Mick Sigson's fishing the cliff tops with a group of anglers. I think they were from the Filey Fishing Club, and he said he heard a bit of commotion, and they're not like, you know, coarse fishermen who sit close to each other. They might be like 500 yards apart, 200 yards apart, and he could hear people talking. When he looked behind him, there's an hillside. He said, and there's a spaceship landing. His words, spaceship. He says, and it came down. He says, and as it came down, he says, all lights flashing around it. He says, and as it started to get close to the top of the hill, all sparks started flashing around it. And then it set on fire, a ring of fire around it as it landed. The fishermen, not all of them, but a lot of the fishermen in close proximity, some of them left their fishing tackle. This is 1998. It's not a busy place. If I go up there tomorrow night, which I will, there'll probably be a team of people up there, probably 8 or 9 of us, and there'll be nobody else, you know? Yeah. It's busy in the daytime. It's because it's a nature reserve. It's a bird colony, you know, gannets and puffins. But 1998, it would have even been more sparse and isolated. He said, and Mick, I said to Mick, I said, what did you do? He says, we got in his cars and we left. I mean, I honestly believe I'd have wanted to, I don't mean go up and touch it, but I wanted to observe. But they didn't. And there's lots and lots of reports. That particular hillside, there's certain locations, people would, you know, you'd call it some kind of hotspot for the phenomena. But it's not even a hill. You look at it from the cliffs and it looks like a hill. When you get onto the top of it, it levels back. But one of my daughters, she were waiting to move to a new property, and she's not interested in what my wife watches, like the TV soaps and everything. And she knew Ogan at Cliffs. I think she'd be about 35 at the time, Gemma, and she said, I'll come with you, Dad. So she came with me and an old guy called Bob Brown. And this is a spooky one, because she's not really got a vast interest in it. She just didn't want to sit watching TV soaps. So I'm setting a camera up, looking out over at sea. I'm just getting it on a tripod, doing that. And she's talking to Bob, looking towards that hill. She'd got a big torch of mine, and she's shone it. And she says, "What's that white square there, Bob?" Says, so about 3 or 4 foot off the ground, there's a something like an A4 square of white.
Yeah.
Bob said, "Oh, I think it's a board somebody's put on a post, maybe."
Yeah.
It's in the middle of a field. He realised straight away that there's no board on a field. So he put his torch on it, and they both got animated and said it just dropped to the ground and disappeared. So that was that. There's lots and lots of phenomena. I wouldn't say that doesn't conform, but there's a lot of that up there. A lot of the strangeness that people are thinking, oh, UFOs, and they're trying to turn it into some exotic craft. There's a lot of that strangeness up there. So that particular night, so Gemma's seen this, Bob's seen it. We drive home. We get home. I don't know. My wife's watching TV. I have a drink of tea or whatever, and I'll just explain that there's a little TV room. There's a large room to the left, and there's a hallway leading to the bedrooms. Yeah. This is a flat. A 2-bedroom flat that I live in, and there's flats above, but they're our flats. Yeah. So there's nobody living above that in that flat. I need to stress that for anybody that says, "Oh, but what person above?" And the wall at the back of us, there's a passageway. It's a brick wall at the back of us. There's a passage which is all private to our property and the block of flats. So it makes sense in a moment, guys. She says, "Mum and Dad have gone to bed." She's watching the TV. Just sat there, minding her own business. Tell you, film that we're on, she said it was Prison Break. So she's watching that. She said, and I became aware of a noise, and I thought it was thunder. She said, and I turned TV down. She said, and then I realised right at the back of my head, there's something growling. Mm-hmm. There's a brick wall at the back of her head. She says, I could feel it shaking the insides of my body. You know, like it's a rock concert when you've got the bass, the heavy bass.
Reverberating.
Yeah, and I can feel it. She says, I was absolutely terrified. She says, I can't believe it didn't wake you up. We never heard anything. And I think, you know, people talk about the hitchhiker effect. Yes. And once again, we're only dealing with words, because I don't think there's such thing as something attaching itself to a person and traveling back with them. I'm not saying that the presence or the essence of something doesn't travel back with you, but I honestly believe, just Paul's thoughts here, that it's only a thought process away. I think that all we've got to do after a profound experience is start thinking about it and start concentrating on it, and its eyelids kind of flicker, and it's with you. Yeah, it's
almost like a manifestation, right?
Absolutely, yeah. I just think it's a thought process away. You know, because I know a lot of people tend to think, the hitchhiker effect, and it's almost as though you're trying to say, this thing's attached itself in some way. But I could be wrong.
Backpack or something.
Yeah, I could be wrong, right? But I just think it's a thought I've spoken to hundreds and hundreds of witnesses. Some of them have told me some really harrowing and horrific stories about their encounters with different types of phenomena. Some of it's been euphoric, and absolutely brilliant. But what they've said to me, because it's taken years to speak about it and sort of pluck up courage to talk about it, they've contacted me on a few occasions and said, do you know what? I feel like it's with me. I feel like I've woken it up. Yeah. Now, and it frightens a person. And, you can almost sort of think it into existence without having an overactive imagination and imagining things. Because we're not here talking about unexplained phenomena because we think it might be real. We know that there's a reality to it. And anybody outside of this that sort of takes a look in and has a few cheap shots, get on with it. I'm not really bothered, because eventually one day, and I would hate anything bad to happen to you, but it might happen to you, and then you'll think different.
Yeah, we've had some weird instances, and obviously, I watched you talk. I think it would have been this time last year at Awakening, and obviously there was a huge case just up the road from you in Hunmanby.
Absolutely.
And I think you title it the greatest UFO story never to be told.
It really is. I think it is. I think it's the most sensational. And there'll be somebody sat out there with something even better, then it'll go to the grave with people. But I've never, ever looked into a case like Hunmanby before. It's It's mind-blowing, and it's still mind-blowing every time. And what's crazy, I'd lived here for 20 years, and I know the witnesses. And if I were to stand outside now, I can actually, 200 yards away, I can see that their homes where two of them live.
Yeah.
And they never told me. They never told me. Well, only when one of the sons ended up working with me and doing some labouring for me, because I was a joiner back then, and they started. They knew I were interested in unexplained, and he never said. And then they ended up working at a club in Flamborough, doing some painting and decorating, and started speaking about unexplained. And they unfolded this story on the guy that were handling the finances at the club.
Yeah.
Told them about what happened. Incidentally, 1998. And this guy just suddenly said, well, you've got to tell Paul Sinclair. He's a friend of mine. Well, they're friends of mine as well. And they'd never told me. But he were too late then. Within days, I was sort of onto him. And the rest, as you say, is history. I've interviewed all of them. And I don't think anybody else has ever interviewed them. But they've gone on film and allowed to record audio and film of them talking about Hummingbee, rather than it just being Paul sensationalizing. And we've got a case here, Coley, where in 1996, 97 and 98, these men worked at an industrial unit. So we're not in the middle of woods. We're not in a haunted house. We're in a big industrial unit where they're restoring and working on motor vehicles, high-end motor vehicles and fairground rides, doing the artwork on them and all sorts of things. And these guys, Dave and Andrew, used to go as a second job. They were young men back in 1990s, so they had day jobs, and then on a night, trying to make their way in the world, and so they'd get more money, they'd go and work at this unit. And they'd work there from, say, 8 at night till about 10, 11, 12 on a weekend, sometimes 3, 4 in the morning. And it started to happen. It started to happen subtly. I think it was June, July, and August of all those 3 years. And they'd be... Andrew said he experienced it first. He said, I'd got there, there was nobody else there. Boss hadn't come. I've interviewed the boss. That's all I'll ever call him, because he doesn't want his name. But other two are good to go with it. Yeah. He says, I'm preparing a car to be sprayed. And I've spoke about him, Hummingbee, before. How deep do you want me to go with it, Jay?
Just a brief overview is
right. Okay. So just briefly, then there's this big warehouse is empty. It's devoid of everything except motor vehicles, but except the bottom corner, it's got a little office block, a little toilet block, and an office above it. He said, and a piece of wood comes straight off top. And he thought one of the lads were hiding, his workmates. He says, and I kept watching and thinking, there's somebody up there. There's got to be, because it's just flown across the garage. Then another one comes off, and then next thing, the two guys walk in. So it's not them. And then over the course of June, July, and August, coins would fall from the air in front of them. Gravel would fall from the air. Jam jars, glass jars would fall. Paint tins. Not somebody throwing it. There's high-end motor vehicles.
Like an apport?
Yeah, absolutely. But nothing got damaged. No vehicles got damaged. But Andrew used to taunt the phenomena. This went on for... They'd come outside to the vehicles on a night, and this went on every occasion. But you know when you get a bit of moisture on your outside your car in right conditions, there'd be footprints, huge footprints on the boot, the roof, the bonnet, as though something's walked over it, but not damaged it. You know, Jay, if you stood on a car on panels at car, you'd dent it, you'd damage it. Whatever had done this had huge feet. But there were no damage to the panels. They'd come out to the cars and they'd see little triangles of gravel on the bonnets of the cars. So all of these things were happening, and more. It was never ending. I mean, and then when they were clearing the land, probably a year into it, 2 years into it, because somebody wanted to rent a bit of space off them to essentially break caravans up and create a caravan scrapyard. Yeah, they found a grave, a little wooden grave of a little girl, but once again, these guys attached everything that were happening to the spirit, to the ghost of the little girl. And it's not forced to have been anything to do with that, do you know? But that's what we did. We, as humans, we're looking for most logical, aren't we? Yeah. So they never talked about it much because they did at first, and they became the laughing stock. All the supply shops, the parts, everywhere they went, People knew that, and that these were the guys that talked about the strange occurrences. And then in, I think it was August 1998, the spacecraft landed at the back of the compound. And even today, if I spoke to Andrew now, he'd say it weren't real.
Yeah.
It's got to have been staged. He says it was just like a little 1950s, 60s flying saucer. And it were there, we all smoke around it and lights, electric flashing from it. And there's a little glass dome on top and there's this little alien inside it. And and he still doesn't believe what he's seen. Yeah, it's an incredible story. And to have the witnesses, Andrew's two sons experienced it as well because they were teenagers. They'd go to garage and spend time with their dad, so they'd seen it. They didn't see the alien, but they'd seen the phenomena at work, and it were an incredible time.
Yeah, there was also a heavy military presence. Can you tell us about that?
What, Hummingbee?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So when it says the double doors at the back lifted, and he says, but this is interesting because there's three of them working there, and I don't think they realise when they're telling me about what I was taking in. He says, and I walked to the doors at the bottom and I looked, and I'm looking down the compound and I can see this craft. Andrew got a real good look at it and the alien inside it. He says, and then I walked back. I found myself walking all the way through this industrial unit, little side door at the front, and I opened the door and a military guy grabbed hold of me and sort of shook me about and told me to stay where I was. He were armed, frightened him to death. I got the same story off the other guy, Dave, but they don't remember doing it together. It's strange. Do you know what I mean? He didn't say we all walked there. And then I got the same story off the boss. And the boss I interviewed Andrew separately loads of times, Dave a few times, and Andrew and Dave together, and the boss just a couple of times on his own. But he told me exactly the same. And bear in mind, these men have not met for years. It was Andrew that put me on to Dave. Dave put me on to boss. And so they're not sort of bosom buddies who are sort of exchanging stories all the time. So the military were there, and Dave's mum and dad used to come on a night because he was youngest of these guys. So he'd go home from work, have a bite to eat, and then go straight to this unit. They would come through and spend time with men in workshop. His mum and dad is just, I don't know, a bit of company. I don't know why they did it. I don't think anybody does. But on that night, that they were in a military roadblock, and they got stopped. When we say military, there were no camouflaged vehicles, from what I'm told. Everything were black.
Private security.
So they got stopped on that road. They got removed from their vehicle, taken into the back of a vehicle, and basically frightened. Anything you're going to be told, you never speak about. He said showed them information that told them that these people knew a lot about them. Do you know what I mean? So basically closed them down. I mean, Dave's parents, when I first started getting involved in this particular case, and I'm on it on and off because I think you could probably get obsessed with it, to be honest. And I've got in me from all directions with information. I had to hold on to it. If you did remember, you'd have to stay with it. Basically, when I first started getting into it, he asked his mum and dad if they'd speak to me. They wouldn't. They would not speak about it. He said they've never spoke about it really since that. They were absolutely frightened to death. You can well imagine.
It's crazy stuff, isn't it? And that's just one presentation that you gave last year that absolutely blew me away. Obviously, we speak a lot, privately and whatnot. Can you tell us about what you filmed recently with, I think it was your friend Ian
Linney?
What, and I'll give a little bit of a backstory to this. For about 6 months, when we get off the phone with Paul, he says, I'll send you this footage. And it never sort of materializes. Paul's got so much going on. And last year at the same conference, a friend of Paul's was giving his presentation, a friend called Ian, or Linney is his nickname. And when I saw this footage, which hopefully Paul will explain to you, it's probably the best piece of UFO or UAP footage that I've ever seen in my 20 years of been doing this.
We've filmed some incredible things up there, and probably the reason it's not out there is because I'm just immersed in everything, and I really ought to be getting it out. That bit of footage, what Linny's got, I don't think it's any shortfall in saying that there's probably one of the best bits of footage in the world. And when I'm looking at the stuff that's been released, it's far better than the stuff that's been released. And it ain't that easy to say, but there's little clips of it on Truth Proof YouTube channel. You can find it if you want to look. It really is incredible footage, and it's thermal footage. And I'd filmed something on thermal a few weeks prior to that. But what happened that day, Linny had only just got that thermal camera. He weren't familiar with it at all. And there were me, Ian Linford, so that's why he's Linny, and I think it's Jeremy. And there's a guy who comes up onto cliff tops with us. He has a headlight that's got, when it turns it off, it glows green. So you can still see this dull green glow. So as we're in the darkness, and remember that it's totally devoid of light. They're just crystal clear skies, or if you're on a dark night and there's no cloud, there's a bit of cloud, it's black, it's dark. So we can see this green glow in the darkness, probably about 100 yards away. We thought it was Alex, so he never turned up. So me and Jeremy went to look for him. We thought he might have slipped or whatever. As we're away, he's messing with thermal camera, and he films something on the hillside. You don't know whether these things are set up to, because I always have a pulsar thermal with me. So, and I would have managed to film it as well. Do you know what? It's really weird. So he's managed to film this incredible sphere that's turning, and it's literally just spinning and revolving. And I think he'd got it in color palette. I think he'd got it as in red hot. So you've got a lot of, most thermal cameras, you've got a few color palettes colors to go through. But what's interesting is he keeps it in that same color palette, and it's changing colors. The heat is changing constantly. It's a fabulous bit of footage. When he played it, I had to laugh to myself. Yeah, I had to laugh to myself because Ian, who does a lot of work for Linda Moulton Howe, he saw it and he was straight over. Oh, Linda would like this to feature this, and he went absolutely straight onto it. Do you know what I mean? But obviously, Linda didn't get to see it, or she might have got to see a bit of it. But we've got other plans. I've only ever put little bits of it out because I think it's such an important bit of footage that. Same with a lot of the things that I've managed to film. They're really good bits of footage. So you don't just want to just put on. They're not just bits of lights going through the sky that you might think, oh, that's an iridium flare or that's a satellite, and the people are just getting a little bit excited. These are really strange, anomalous. We've got lights under the sea. All sorts of things, and really, I suppose we need to get it out there. Some of it, it's that difficult because some of it looks like it's filmed on a potato, and we're using really, really good cameras. We use Ionix Aurora Pros, and I've just spent a fortune on a Nikon cinematic. It's really good camera, really nice camera, and so we're using. You could spend 20-30 grand on a camera. Let's face it, but high end for my budget. The pulsar thermals that start at 2-3 grand. You're still using high-end thermal cameras, so it's all good and it's all relevant. And that's what's annoying when you actually sometimes when you put bits of footage out and people are going, "Haven't they ever heard of a GoPro?" You'd get you can't see anything in that light in a GoPro or a DJI. And these are DJI, GoPro, they're good cameras, but they're not going to see in pitch black. Whereas these cameras, at least they've got a fighting chance.
Yeah.
I had footage of myself, but of course I slipped and fell off. Oh, right. Well done.
Talking of cameras, Paul, and probably something a lot of people wouldn't do. Can you tell us about the first time that you saw the eyes, as Bob Brown would call them, in the field?
Yeah. And that's stopped now. So the same place where we've just been on about, Jay, the hillside that isn't an hill when you actually get on top and levels off. For some reason, what year would we be going to? I think 2015 to 2016 to 2018, there'd be big yellow eyes on that field looking at us. Yeah, I don't mean every night, but you'd see them quite often. And I brought up on farms. I brought up in country. Spent a lot of time in woodlands and forests. Yeah. I'm familiar with eye shine of deer and badger and fox. These were different. They were really strange, and you'd walk towards these eyes, with the lamp on. They'd sort of duck away, and then they'd appear a little bit further on, and they'd light up again. You'd get them again. And I don't know what it was we were looking at, but this is the location where the cryptid sightings have been seen. Two military guys on, I think, February the 7th, 2017, and they had a late night walk on cliff tops. And as they're walking down those cliff tops, I'm sure it was February 7th, they said that they lit a pair of eyes up. And he said, we should have known. He said, because the air felt electric. He says it felt off. He says it was weird. He says it just felt weird. And they'd got 2 dogs with them, and they said the dogs were clinging to them. Now, you won't let your dogs off anyway because you're running along parallel to these sheer cliffs. So but he says, but the dogs weren't eager to go anywhere except stay with us. He says, and we walked a bit further and we lit them up again. He says, but they just kind of looked away. Carried on walking. They get to 2 big posts, and people say gate posts, but it used to be a stile, but there's no timber there for that stile. He says, and we walked through the stile, put the light on, and it's there. In his words, he says he thought it were an effing hyena at first. He says it were all bristling and hunkered down. He says, and then it stood up. I'm not asking people to believe me. I'm relaying other people's stories. And what I like about these accounts is a lot of the time I get the witnesses to just say, give me some audio, give me a bit of footage, so it's not just Paul. Because I realize how outrageous these stories sound. He says, then it stood up. He said, and it's there. He said, and he's looking at something. He says about 7 foot tall. He's with this other guy.
Wow.
But he said the most peculiar thing. He said he's looking. They're not far from it. They're only gone through the gate, these posts, and it's there in the field. He said, but it's got its hand, which has got claws on it, under its chest. Now, it wouldn't have been that high, but obviously, and he says, and it's doing that. But not at them. He says, it were really strange. I said, well, what do you do? He says, we backed away. Then they've got probably about 3/4 of a mile to get back to their vehicle. And they go along the cliff tops. Can you imagine that? That probably would have been, for me, I can't imagine it, more terrifying than seeing it. The thought that you're in complete... He says the dogs were terrified. He says the tails were under the bellies. He says the dogs were just terrified. And then they walk back along the cliff tops. Now, as crazy as that story sounds, February the 7th, I think, 2017, then we go back to 2015, and we're once again, they're very close to the north side of Danes Dyke. They're within half a mile, not even that probably. Then we go back to, I think, 2016, 17. There's a guy coming home from a night shift to a nearby industrial unit called complex called Bessingby, and he's got to travel. What's he got to travel? 2 miles. He's driving down, and he gets to where you turn into Danes Dyke, and this is the cutting to put the road through. They've cut into the dike, and I've noted that the cryptids has been seen primarily at the intersections, what I've called the intersections, where the dike's been interfered with the earthworks being interfered with. So he said, I caught sight of eyes in the headlamps, thinking it's a fox or a badger driving down the road. Gets to the bottom. Just before you turn into the actual little woodland, and he's off to Flamborough, he said, and it's there at the side of the road, and he described it as looking like the werewolf in the American Werewolf in London. So this guy said, so right, then we jump forward a few years, and we've got a guy on an invalid scooter who wants to take pictures of the sunrise at Bempton.
Yeah.
Travels from Bridlington, is travelling down into that little bit of a dip, just going up the incline, hears branches, and so there's a physical to it, and foliage moving, and he says this thing steps out onto the road. He's in an invalid scooter. So these people don't know each other. So that's in that same location. Then there's a bus stop, just one single bus stop for people, I imagine, who want to walk around the dike and then maybe get a bus into town.
Yeah.
There's a guy been walking in the north side of Danes Dyke. It's about 10 to 5 at night. It's October. So I'm just changing my Wellington boots, putting some trainers on or some decent footwear before I get on bus. Says, I'm just looking across, and he's at the entrance of Danes Dyke, where these other two reports have been. He says, and this thing comes up out of the dike. Now, there's an old gate post, because Danes Dyke used to have a big manor house in it that got pulled down in 1956. And the posts are still there. And there's a fence, and there's about a 3-foot gap between the post and the fence. He says, and this thing put its head through, and its eyes were sparkling. But he said, but I kid you not, its face looked half human, half dog. Says, what did you do? Yeah, says, well, what did you do? And he says, what? He says, well, it turned and just went back down. He says, and I went to the edge and looked down. I couldn't see anything. So that's 3 in one concentrated area. And then if you went up that road into the little woodland itself, the single track road until you get to the car park, there's another intersection, another cutting in the dike, and a guy called Michael, who's spent a bit of time with us since then on cliff tops, claims to have seen it there. All of these people unconnected to one. He saw it in October 2020, October 23rd. All these people totally unconnected to one another, seeing things of a, well, what would you call it? It's not just unusual. It's off the scale of normal. And you know, I'm 63-year-old. I sit here and I think to myself, listen to what you're saying, Paul. Listen to what you're telling people. That either all of these people are lying, and you've got to have faith in people. If somebody's going to bare the soul and tell you these things, you can't turn around and go, well, he could have been lying, I suppose. I don't know. You've got to have faith in them. I've had people contact me, and give me reports, and I've said, oh, that's fabulous, and thank you for telling me that. Really, really appreciate it, and I've not done I've not done a thing with it, because I thought, this ain't on the level. Yeah. It doesn't mean I'm right, by the way, but I just won't run with it. But there's certain ones that you just think, it's all patterns are there. They're saying it. There's truth in what these people are saying. So I have to do it. And how can I judge people when I've wrote a book like The Night People? Yeah, about my experiences. Yeah. Do you know what position am I in? I used to be thinking I'd never talk about it. Even when I got married, I didn't really say out to Mary about the things that happened in childhood. It took years, and I'd just not talk about it. And now, do you know what I think? Why? Why am I lying? Why should I lie and pretend these things haven't happened when I know that they have happened? Yeah. And people say, well, it'd be sleep paralysis. Sleep paralysis don't put holes in your back and holes in your arm. Arms. That doesn't happen. In the words of Whitley Strieber, he doesn't know anybody that's been more affected by the visitors than Paul Sinclair. And do you know, and there will be people, by the way, that have been far more affected. But Whitley, that's what he said. So,
Wasn't there a connection as well to, was it Roslyn Chapel with yourself in your name?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. A good friend of mine who's passed away now, Andy Tong, musician. I think he used to do work with Alice Cooper, funnily enough. But anyway, Andy were into family trees, and he said he'd do my family tree. Right. And I've still got it somewhere. I ought to have sort of made more of it really than I did. And Whitley Strieber said, I think that you've got links to Roslyn. I don't know whether he just said it because of the name Sinclair. Do you know what I mean? But that's what he said. Yeah. So Andy decided to do the family tree and discovered that I was that William St. Clair, I wouldn't have said he was the man who built it, but the founder of Roslyn Chapel. Yeah. Is my 11th generational grandfather. That's crazy, isn't it?
That's great. That is nuts, isn't it? That correlation.
Absolutely. And obviously my grandparents lived in Scotland, and we'd go up there quite often, but we never went to Roslyn. And then probably 2 years ago, one of our girls, Jess, she says, shall we go? I said, yes. So me, Jess, her husband and little lad, we had a run up to Roslyn, and we stayed there for about 5 days. And we lived for 5 days. We had the house next door to the chapel, literally just a wall between, a garden wall between Roslyn Chapel and where we were. It's called College Hill House. And it was fabulous. It was brilliant to be able to actually visit somewhere that potentially my ancestors had frequented, you know. And but I'll tell you what, were even more fabulous. College Hill House, this wonderful ancient house, great big thick walls, and it had a visitor book which were huge, like a ledger. It was full of ghost stories and spirit encounters.
Really?
I encountered and saw nothing. Absolutely, Jessica did. She claims that in years gone by, a few hundred years ago, it used to be a pub, like a tavern, and she thought she heard because they were all flagstones downstairs on floors.
Yeah,
she could hear barrels rolling. Like that's what she thought she could hear. That's what she likened it to. But when I looked through the book, the room we were in, and you know, I didn't say, "Oh, that's the room," but you kind of got where you were. There's this lady put an entry into the book, and she said, woke up in bed last night, and there's a doorway that's opened in the ceiling, and I can see light pouring in. There were another entry. Has anyone seen the devil imp? There were loads and loads of entries in this book. Which
and how far is this dating back?
Oh, it's the actual visitor book, because I wouldn't have thought it's been some kind of guest house. Well, it weren't guest house. You actually hired the house and had it, you know, to yourselves. Right. That probably that can't have been going back more than 20, 30 years. I wouldn't have thought.
Wow.
But you know, the house itself is really old, hundreds and hundreds of years old.
Yeah.
You'll be able to Google it, have a look at it. You'll be able to see College Hill House.
Yeah, be interested.
So yeah, it was great. So to spending a bit of time in Rosslyn Chapel. Unfortunately, weather were atrocious, but there you go.
When you were making, obviously, your most recent documentary that is available on Amazon Video called Wolflands, you seem to find a lot of correlation to a lot of the old names of the Spittles and even the names in the woods. Can you put that together for us?
Yeah, well, I'll try. The thing is, a lot of the old folklore and a lot of the old terminology, when you kind of break it down, and it's referring to the phenomena if you look for it. And I don't mean you look for something and think, oh, that might fit.
Yeah.
If you look for it, it's referring to the phenomenon. Like obviously, the Spittle's pretty hospital, and all of the Wolflands basically started. We'll get to some of them names in a moment. Wolflands basically started with me looking into the accounts of the Flixton werewolf, which is probably one of the oldest werewolf accounts in the world, if not the oldest. And basically, the little village about 12 miles from where I live called Flixton. And in ancient times, and in 937 AD, so we're going back well over 1,000 years, 30 years, probably. I'm not certain. Do the math. Somebody will. So 937 AD, the then king of the day, King Athelstan. So it's not all like fantasy and folklore. He existed. He wrote this down, and he ordered that a refuge be built at Flixton to protect travellers from wolves. Now, let's not forget, wolves would have been prevalent in 937 AD. Wolves would have been roaming the United Kingdom, and they'd have been a very real threat. Yeah? Bears had gone 1,500 years before, so there were no bears. So that'll make sense in a moment, because it said to protect from travellers from wolves, and then it said something really odd: an infestation of savage beasts, and an infestation of savage beasts. So then, when I wrote the first book, this one, little plug.
Brilliant book. Go get it on Amazon.
Go get it on Amazon. When I bought the first book, the newspaper kindly put a little article in for me. Author wants stories of the strange and unusual. And I got a few reports from Flixton of people claiming to have seen something that we would describe as a werewolf. So then you go back in time and you listen, you read all this terminology, and it's an ancient archaeological site as well. It's a site of great importance. It's called Flixton Star Car. And Flixton sits on a dried up lake bed, which would have been in Paleolithic times. This lake bed was sort of rich in wildlife and fish, and a great place. And what am I saying? The archaeologists of the day, Mark Coley being one of them. You know Mark?
Yes, I know Mark. Great
Coley,
guy.
So the archaeologists of the day, Mark Coley being one of them, concluded that the settlers of Flixton Star Car were shaman, because they found evidence of not just animal butchery for food, but animal butchery for almost sacrifice. And they thought they were shamanistic and practicing shamanistic ritual. Now, I'm not saying that's the reason for the Flixton werewolf, but it's interesting, isn't it? The transformation of the beast. And I'm not saying lycanthropy is possible either. I don't personally think it is. But the point is that you've got all these connotations. And then when you get from Flixton, you're not far from Broxa Forest, which is where we filmed a lot of Wolflands. Now, in Portuguese folklore, how does a name like Broxa fit with something? A Broxa in Portuguese folklore is a shapeshifter.
Yeah.
And then close to Broxa Forest, you've got a place called Morrig. More, and it's spelled M-A-W. Now, the maw is the jaw, the gaping jaws, the maw. There's loads more. You've got Wolf How. A how is a burial mound. You've got loads and loads of connotations to the wolf and Norse terminology in and around that location. And it's not far from Flixton. And all of it's running, of course, very close to what the River Derwent. We've got water source. We've got running water where the cryptid phenomena is prevalent as well. Everything has to drink, doesn't it? But you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Go on then, hit me with something else.
It's a bit of a personal question. What's the emotional toll of spending years listening to some of these witnesses, as you say, extremely frightened? It takes them sometimes decades to come forward.
It's heavy.
Yeah.
It's at times it's heavy. And at times, you'll have done this, Jay. Maybe Coley's done it. I don't mean maybe in a condescending way, because I don't know how deep your research, Coley. But a lot of people will have done it, and some people couldn't care less. But I've spoken to people, and some people will just think, I want the story at all costs. I'm not bothered what's happened to these people afterwards. Well, I am. And some people, you realize that you think they have had that experience, but they're emotionally fragile. And I'm not going to pursue this because I don't want to ignite even more turmoil. Just like when we spoke earlier, probably an hour ago, when, you get a witness who's never talked about something for years, and then they've contacted me and say, it's almost, I feel like it's watching me. I feel like it's aware again. And some people can handle that kind of thought, but some people, I'm no psychiatrist, I'm no therapist, but you feel like you are sometimes, and you're there to help people. I want to help everybody I can within the subject, and sometimes helping people is not trying to nurture that story out of them. If they've sat in seclusion all their life and buried it far, far away, and I don't know, for some reason you might get a little taster that there's a story, and you start inquiring about it, and then you realize, no, step back. This is too much. It's too much emotion for some people, and then you're carrying it as well. You're carrying what they've seen and what they've experienced, and some of the abduction experiences are truly horrific, and maybe, I don't know. It's just hard. It's difficult. You're carrying it, and we're not maybe mentally equipped to carry some of this stuff, because it's well out of the remit of what anybody deems as normal. Let's face it.
Yeah, paranormal.
Very true. Yeah. Well, I was a mental health therapist for 7 years, Paul, before I got into this, so I understand. And there's countertransference that happens, and sometimes when you get in there, it seems like trauma is the way through this.
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
It does. Yeah, absolutely.
Is there ever been a time, Paul, where you feared for your own safety while investigating a case?
Yeah. When I was looking into that aircraft disappearance and tragedy, there were things happening then that couldn't be denied. Now, the main witness for me were Tom Quinn, and I'll not labor too deep on it, but I had a message left on my answer phone, and it was a recording of Tom Quinn in the warehouse. They have the fishing warehouse where all the lads do the lobster pots and crab pots, and on the harbour. And it was him talking in the warehouse, Not about UFOs, not about aircraft, just talking. But it was left on my answer phone. So I recorded it on a little voice recorder. I took it down. I said, listen to this. I said, that's me, Paul. He says, have you been recording us? I said, no, I haven't, but somebody has. And they've left it on my phone. And it kind of, it's, all right, it's not sinister. It's weird. It's strange. And there has been other instances. And there's been times up on those cliff tops. Because I used, before, we'll call it a team of guys that come up there with us.
Yeah.
Before then, it were all me. I were on my own. Or Steve Ashbridge if we went on Wolds. But if I were on the cliff tops, spent years up there. And it's absolutely bleak. You've got the north side,
it is.
Farmland, and you've got nothing. And you're up there in darkness. There were one particular night, I mean, it may not have been... I'm a big believer, and I think a lot of people in chat, a lot of people who listen to this probably may think the same. I hope you do, that you just trust your gut. If something doesn't feel right, if you've got a bad feeling about somebody, you could be wrong, but just stay with your gut feeling at first. So this particular night, I'm on the cliff tops. I'm in the darkness. There's the car park where the visitor centre for the RSPB is, and that's quarter of a mile away. And I see headlights coming along this single track road. Don't think how weird at first. And we've gone from paranormal here, so you just have to bear with me because you've set me off on this one now.
No worries.
there's a double farm gate at the bottom of the car park, and a vehicle pulls up, and two men get on, and they're standing on the gate shining torches down. And I suddenly felt uneasy, and I don't know why, because normally I'm okay. And I felt really uneasy. And there's two ways back to the compound. There's one from that gate where it says
I know.
people shouldn't walk down it, and then there's the path. Yeah. So I thought, that's odd. And I kept in darkness. I didn't put no lights on. 2 minutes later, they're in the vehicle, and I see the vehicle driving away. But I didn't see the tail lights, because you lose sight of it for about 10 seconds. Then you see the tail lights. And I didn't see tail lights. And I thought that were odd. But then I became okay. I were in my comfort zone again. Everything's fine. And 10 minutes later, suddenly, the tail lights come on. I put a torch on to look at something, and I saw the tail lights light up. Luckily, I was facing that way. And instantly I thought, oh, no. So tail lights come on, and they literally did a loop, and they came straight back down into car park. Could have been somebody just to say, hey, Paul.
There's that as well.
So I packed my things up an hour off, and I went along the cliff tops and up the path because they came down over that gate. So they literally, as soon as my light went on, their tail lights came on, and they sort of did a loop round, and they came down. And as they're coming down, I'm going up other side. And it was a Range Rover, a gold Range Rover. I got the number, and I ran it past a police officer friend of mine who had a look, and he said there's nothing untoward with the vehicle, so it could have been perfectly innocent. But there were one night I were up there with Bob Brown, and so you've just spurred me on it, and that were odd because it's all private land at the back of on the fields, and there's a Range Rover on that hill where we've just been talking about the strange occurrences. Beautiful Range Rover Vogue, really top at range vehicle. And as we're walking, it's paralleling us in the darkness as it's getting darker. We get to where we want to set up cameras, and it's gone dark. They've cut the crop, so you've only got the stubble. This will make sense in a moment. 10 minutes later, half an hour later, I can hear the crunching of the stubble, and this Range Rover comes up in the darkness with no lights on, blacked out windows, and literally parks at the back of us. And we're 30 foot away. This is Paul, by the way. I took a tape. Afterwards, I wanted to know how far we were away from where we were, and they were 30 foot away. They sat in darkness, and they're just in silence. Can't see inside the vehicle. No lights on as they've come up in night, and they're just sat at the back of us. So Bob says, "What shall we do? Shall we run?" Well, listen, I think I probably would have been about, when I'm at 63, I'd have been about 58. Bob's 80 now. I thought, well, the best will in the world, we're not running anywhere, mate. So we stay here. And eventually it just ambled off into darkness. I felt like that was intimidation. Could be wrong. So for anybody listening who says, well, where we, it weren't a farmer, because I did actually ring one of the farmers who I know. I said, is anybody up here? And I told him, I described it. He says, there shouldn't be nobody. He got back to me, says, there shouldn't be nobody up there. Yeah.
And this, let's add that this is completely in the middle of nowhere.
Absolutely, yeah.
And it's other than summertime, I think you get your twitches up there looking at the rare birds.
Yeah.
As you park up at the RSB PB reserve there.
It's very busy, Jay, in daytime, but on a night, nobody. It's bitterly cold. You've got North Sea. You're right on edge at North Sea.
Yeah. Just briefly as well, encompassing with the theme that we're talking about. There's also been a lot of animal mutilations, hasn't there? And there was a period, I think you were up there every morning, was it? Like 4 or 5 a.m.?
What I used to go up about in between 4 and 4:30, and I did 3 or 4 days a week. Farmer would do other 3 or 4 days a week, but he'd only go up at 8 o'clock. Lovely guy, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And I got to find out about it. It was New Year's Day, and I think it was 2017, and there was a vagrant who lived in Danes Dyke. He'd lived there 13 years. And probably not obviously then, but when he'd finished it 13 years, and we'd become good friends. He's a lovely guy. And my wife Mary says, let's take him some food up. It's New Year's Day. We'll take him some food. And we did. And he says, you've just missed police. I said, what do you mean? He said, they want to know if I've seen any unusual animals. He said, there's been some sheep killed at Bempton. And so anyhow, I did a bit of digging. I managed to trace Farmer. And I said, look, I'm interested in this. I want to know what's happening with these. And nothing to do with unexplained phenomena, even if we were just catching somebody for killing wildlife.
Yeah.
So it were agreed, and I got permission to go up onto the farm. And I used to go up probably 4 1/2 I think when I got to know about it, he'd probably lost 28 sheep. And
wow.
Right, we'll jump to what it was. I says, when did you start to realize something other than a fox or something were damaging these animals, killing these animals? He said, I went one morning, he said, we've got a sheep run. You imagine the width of a sheep, and it can hold 6 to 7 sheep, nose to tail. And there's a plastic tray in the bottom, and they run through it with this solution in that treats the feet for parasites. He says, I had 2 dogs and 400 sheep on this field, and they can smell it. They'll do anything not to run through this, funnel them into it to because it must sting the feet or whatever. Yeah. He said, I got to these sheep one morning, and I'm not exaggerating here. This is what he told me. There's 30 sheep in this sheep run that's designed for 6 to 7 sheep. He said they're on top of one another. They're hanging over sides because the corrugated sheets pinned. He says, I couldn't believe what I was looking at. He says, and this has happened in night, and I just can't believe it. He said, so we start unpinning the sheets. He said, and getting them free. He says they're in a right state of sort of heat exhaustion and fear. Yeah. He said there's 2 dead, nothing untoward. They've died of heat exhaustion and fear. So that's when I realized something really strange was happening. Well, then over the course of 2017 to 2019, I was spending all them mornings up there and going on and doing my little grid walk, and then I'd go into the woods and come out. But you could guarantee you'd find one every few weeks. But what was strange, the ears would be removed in most instances, and the eyes. Then you'd got your experts who were saying, well, crows will attack eyes. No, these no. That you could lift the head of the sheep and it had gone on part that's down on ground where both eyes would have been gone. Do you know what I'm saying? And a front left leg, and ears and eyes. I never caught or got even close. The police were involved before I'd come. The police had been involved with marksmen in the field staking it out. And from what I'm told, they found one in the field while they'd been in there the next morning. But I never got to the bottom of what was doing it. It definitely weren't people. Very rarely you hear me sort of jump off fence and say definitely, but it weren't people. Because during the course of it, remember the farmer's only interested in his livestock.
Yes,
I was spending time then in the woodland around that area, and I was finding roe deer, the same. The same wounds, the same injuries. I was finding badger. I was finding fox. All of these animals. It's just absolutely. It were off the scale, and that stopped in early 2019. Yeah. And when it stopped, he'd lost 50 sheep.
Wow.
And I used to dread ringing him You know, I'd say I found another one. You know, and he'd really. I actually got. I thought I were a shepherd in end. It were really weird. I got used to
You'd
him.
make a good shepherd. You got the hairdo.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, when I first started going, I had Mary's little dog. She's got this little tiny dog that, honestly, it couldn't have handled a rabbit. But so we'd go to the sheep, and like a swarm of flies, they'd all just go to the other end of the field because we were new. Over the years, I could just walk amongst them, and the little dog. It was so weird. I said, when you get close to them, they stand in a certain stance. They have a wee. We're unexplained phenomena, guys, but it was so interesting. It was a learning curve, learning about the sheep and how close you could get to them, and what you know. Did you know that a sheep, when it rolls over, it can't right itself? Did you know that?
Yeah, I didn't know that. No.
So hey, we've learned that on the unexplained phenomena. No, you've got to actually stand them up and stand with them for a minute or so till they get the balance again and let them go. But anyway, wow. I'm rambling. Keep going.
But it also reminds me, you know, and as the crow flies, I think it was Filey Beach, wasn't it, where the seals were found? They were washed upon the beach with just like the head incision.
There were head incisions, and there were terrible lacerations on the shields. The seals. Shields? It's a shields. Did I really say that? Yes, but a lot of them, very, very deep wounds, and there were quite a lot being found. And some of them, I think some of them were propeller wounds.
Yeah.
And, you know, I don't know if you know David Caton, the guy who did a lot of the animal mutilation cases.
Phil Oil.
Yeah. And I mean, I was a great guy, David, but I didn't agree with some of it because there were spiral wounds on these seals.
Right.
But because I've spent a lot of time with the fishermen, the trawlermen, if they don't want to sound too macabre for people who are animal lovers, but if the propeller hits a seal, it'll spin it and create a spiral wound. So a lot of some of them could be attributed to, you wouldn't call it a natural causes, but something of an earthly origin. Not everything's unexplained phenomena, but there truly is unexplained things what David's looked at and Phil Hoyle. And just like the sheep, I can't understand for the life of me. This man lost 50 sheep, not 49, not 51. He lost 50 sheep. And only thing that were missing were the eyes, the ears, in some instances the tongue, and the front left leg. It just don't compute, does it? And you think to yourself, you could probably a quick human in the darkness could probably catch a sheep, but you're not going to catch a roe deer. You're not going to catch a fox, and you're not going to catch a badger. Yeah. So there you go.
It's bonkers. I remember when, you know, alluding to earlier when I was in Danesdyke Woods, and you had been away for the weekend, and when you came back, you sent me some images of a roe deer. And it looked like something had burst out of it from inside out.
Oh, yeah, that one in Danesdyke.
Through the rib cage.
Yeah, and you know, it's all pretty macabre, Coley, but when I found that, it were almost like one of them, can you remember the movie Jaws? And you got that music when the shark was saying that. It kind of felt one of them surreal moments when I found this deer, because it looked like it had been an explosion had gone from inside out, and the liver was sliced in half as well, really clean cut, and really, really strange sort of wounds on the roe deer. Plus, myself and Chris Turner, we took a Geiger counter in there, and it went off the scale. We got that's on Bringing Down the Light, you know, the film, the documentary that we made, and it literally went off the scale around the area. I were only showing him where this deer had been, literally just showing him where we'd found it. It had gone. That were months before that I'd found the deer, but the Geiger counter just went off the scale. But interestingly, a few days later, it did nothing. It's just like the 1.6 gigahertz. You know, this magic frequency that they pick up at Skinwalker. We get it up at Bempton. But you can go a week or 2 weeks later, and you know, we have a guy, Peter Masters, who was an electronics expert, and the kit that he's using is very similar, if not the same, as what they're using to detect these signals at Skinwalker. How do I know that? Because it's Peter's friends who are developing it, and we've been using it up there, and we've detected 1.6 gigahertz at Bempton, but then you'll go again, and it's not there. You'll go to the Rudston monolith, which is about, 12 miles away. And that's the tallest standing stone in Great Britain. And we've had 1.6 gigahertz at the Hudson Monolith. You'll go another time and it's not there. It's weird. Is it you feel like you're going nuts. Is the phenomena teasing us? Is it playing with us? We go with it. We went looking for the signal and found it. Yeah. Then we go again looking for the signal and we can't find it. It's really, really strange.
One of the things that's always stood out to me, and you'll know straight away which I'm referring to. I think it's in Truth Proof 1 where you were out, I think, in the town of Bridlington with Mary, and you had a weird encounter with a guy on a bike. And
absolutely.
And what he said to you.
Well, that's the reason for the film Bringing Down the Light. And Truth Proof 3, the subtitle is Bringing Down the Light.
Yeah.
So me and phones, I've 4 girls, so I always used to we'd get girls good phones and I'd end up with their old phone. So Jess gave me a phone. And I had to take it down to this shop to have it unlocked. And it all makes sense, this people. Stay with it. So me and my wife go out onto the front, on a big bold Victorian houses, and the street fans out. And at the bottom, there's a barber's shop. Say the barber's shop because it'll make sense in a moment. So as we're walking out, a man starts shouting straight away. And I don't know what he's shouting at. And it's late in year. We're not quite winter, but it's cold. But it's sunny. And I could hear him talking about light. And I looked over to him, and he's at the other side of the road as it fans out. And he's got some trousers on, jeans on, I think, and no shirt. And he's everything's in proportion. You picture Action Man, the doll, the Action Man, the kid's toy. He looks like that. He absolutely looks like that. And he's got a bald head. So, and I can hear him saying, like, you're bringing down the light. And I thought, what's he on about? So I just shouted over, yeah, mate. I said, we've not got many more warm days left. Enjoy it. And I walked off to get this phone unlocked.
Yeah.
Dropped the phone off. He said, guy says, come back in an hour or two or whatever. And he must have rattled me because I says to Mary, I said, I might walk round the other way. I don't want to encounter that nutter again. Yeah. But I didn't. Anyway, we walked back. And as we walk back, it's now our side of the road, but he's put a jumper on. And it's a very tight-fitting, dark brown crew neck jumper. And this guy's got a bald head. But I knew it was him. As soon as I'm walking down the street, he's got his back to me. And then he just stands up, turns around, looks at me, and goes, you're bringing down the light. You're causing problems. You've got to stop. I went, what? He went, you're causing problems. You've got to stop.
And you've never encountered this guy ever
encountered him in my life. No idea who he is. And he's telling me all this, and I like to think, well, you've heard me now. You haven't had much chance to talk, have you? I can talk, and I like to think I can talk my way out of things or into things or just hold my own in a conversation. And as every time I tried to make sense of this man, he just tied me knots. He just literally had me knots. I couldn't. If he'd have said, I don't know, sun were black, He'd have convinced me that it were weird. And so he stood there and I'm looking at him and he's about 5'8", 5'9", really muscular. He's got full wraparound black sunglasses on and this bald head. And I'm looking at him and I'm just getting to a point where I'm thinking, I'm sick of you, mate. And we're going to fall out in a minute. And I really were thinking that. And he put his hand, he just went out and he just put his hand on Mary's shoulder, just went, and I was so close to grabbing his wrist, and he took it away, and he went, I'm not talking to her. I'm talking to you. You're causing big problems. You're bringing down the light, and you've got to stop. You know what you're doing. And I said, I've had enough of this, mate. And I walked away and left him, and he's still shouting it. So then a few days later, the barber, John the barber, that's why I mentioned the barber's shop, and he still knows to this day. He's still there, John. He came out and spoke to us. He says, oh, well, that other day then. I says, I've no idea, mate. He says he were waiting for you. He says he'd been waiting ages. He says we'd seen him going up. He'd got a bike with him on the side of the wall. It will enter the side of the wall. An old green bike, very old. There's another bit to this as well. He said, as soon as you came out of your gate, he made a beeline for you. He were waiting for you. But Mary said to me, she says, did you see his bike? I said, what do you mean? She says, it had no brakes. You know. Says, and I asked him where he were from, and we couldn't remember. And then a few weeks later, there were a missing person. That someone had gone missing, and on news it weren't him, by the way. It weren't this man, but I can't remember time difference. But when it came on news, it said this man had gone missing, and he was from Rickle. And I said to Mary, that was the place that guy said he was from, Rickle. Do you know, in North Yorkshire? But it weren't him. I need to stress it wasn't him. Yeah. It's probably just a coincidence. But fascinating that bringing down the light. And when you look into it and you look at the Lucifer apparently was the bringer of light. I hope he won't call him a devil.
So did any of the witnesses that you've spoken to ever experience follow-up phenomenon? So they've told you the account and then there's been a continuation of that.
Yeah, just ongoing. Yeah, a lot of people experience it. I mean, and I think more now, Jay and Colin, more now that people are more accepting. We've been able to talk about this in mainstream a lot more, aren't we? And in public a lot more. I don't mean everybody accepts it, but a lot of people are coming round to the idea that there's a reality to this. And where does that fit with what you've just said? No, a lot of people will report other things happening and strangeness occurring, basically after they've started talking about it. And that's quite frightening. Again, it's much like the hitchhiker effect, really, isn't it? When we're talking about that and we believe that this phenomena's travelled home with us, or we thought about it and concentrate. Is this any different to? I'm not deeply religious, but is it any different to prayer? You know, when we pray, and some people claim that they are touched by the Spirit, they're touched by God because they're praying. Is any of this any different? And I'm not downplaying anybody's religion here, people, but ultimately, I think we're all praying to the same thing. Yeah. Ultimately, I think the great unknown is all part and parcel of it. And absolutely. I haven't answered your question, Jay, has it? I realise that, but
no, but it was kind of leading on to my next question.
Hello, Paul. Hello, Benno from Oz. Good to see you. Is Dragonborn in chat?
Yeah.
Coley's just answering.
Yeah, brilliant. Good to see you, Dragonborn.
Your Laura's in as well.
Oh, it's Laura in. Good to see you. Yeah, yeah, thank you. and yeah, excellent. Thanks for the support, guys. I can't see chat, else I would have said that before, but yeah, thank you.
Yeah, you have a lot of support in here, Paul. It's wonderful to see.
Yes, it's good.
It's popular. Yeah, so what I was going to say is the correlation between a lot of these events and consciousness is sometimes, and this again is just me sort of postulating this, but maybe the first event is the trigger to kind of open that part of the brain, maybe, or that part of consciousness. Now, you mentioned prayer, and I'm a firm believer that prayer, intent, thought, meditation, they're all kind of one and the same, as in what we project out. So if that seed has been planted, shall we say, and, someone's either seen something, be it Dogman or a UAP or something off the cliff tops, and then there's a continuation of that, is that spiritual people will call it an awakening of sorts. Do you believe that plays a part in this? In what we're dealing with?
I think it does, Jay. Yeah, I think it probably plays a massive part. And I've said it before. UFO researchers see UFOs, ghost hunters see ghosts, cryptid hunters, or researchers see cryptids. Usually, a person has a profound experience, and then they become absolutely. In some instances, they'll close down altogether and not want to put it in a box, never to think about it again. But in a lot of instances, people, they're opened up to it. And once you've been switched on to it, you know the reality of it, Jay, don't you? Yeah, you know the reality of it. So you're thinking about it. You know it's possible. We got the visitation, the light visitation on the cliff tops. So if we never saw anything again, I mean, I know about with the night people, but if we never saw anything again up there, we'll go up there forever because of what we experienced about 6 or 8 months ago. We've experienced lots of things up there, but we all every day we talk about it when we go up there. We were visited. You should just
For the listeners that obviously I didn't want to mention that because of the sensitivity of your friend having treatment, but can you tell us about that encounter? Because you told me privately, didn't you?
Yeah, I can do. And to be honest with you, he wouldn't mind because he got all clear Monday, I think. Monday or
No
Tuesday.
ways.
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
You said that to me on the phone at the time. Wouldn't it be?
We all think it was for Pete, but who can say? It's wishful thinking because you want the best for somebody who's ill. So we were up there. I'd like to give you a date, but I can't remember. But it's we'll say 6 or 8 months ago. Yeah. And there's seven of us up there, and we're on the cliff tops in the darkness. There's no one else around. It's a bit weird, innit? Sometimes there's women, there's men, but they were just 7 blokes at this time, and we're all sort of evenly spaced. 6 or 7 foot apart in this circle chatting. Oh, cameras ready. We've got cameras all over the place, open, looking to the sky, open. Unfortunately, we didn't have them on us. And this light came in. The size of an apple or a tennis ball. And it just, first of all, I saw it. I was talking to Mark and I saw a light up the floor. Nobody else saw it. And I just said, whoa, we're just in a light. Well, anybody flicked a torch on? Nobody did. Then this light came in, and there's a guy called Chris Mack, who's a good friend. He stood opposite me. It's Pete there, Winnie, and it hit Chris Mack in the stomach and lit him up.
So this thing bounced off him physically.
It hit him in the stomach. Chris Mack never saw it. I'm swearing. And
yeah.
Oh, I can't believe what I'm looking at. Chris Mack is doing the same. He says because it's Pete's hand, and Pete's hand is glowing. I think Chris got a better sighting of it than anybody, and we all saw it because he said this ball, it had a blue electrical energy around its outside. He said it was like fighting for life. Yeah. And then it just shot off through the fence and into the undergrowth, and it had gone. But all 7 of us saw it, and it kind of bounced from everybody. I don't think it hit me actually, but I saw it hit Chris Mack. Let's say then 30 minutes later, because we're all talking about it, it comes again. This isn't a torch or somebody on a hillside. This is an independent ball of light. And what's fascinating, and what I always noted with the ILFs, the light forms, these incredible lights, they're vibrant and very bright, but they're not illuminating the area around them. Do you know, it's almost as if they're in their own little biosphere of life, because the brightness of the light that hit Chris Mack in the stomach, it lit his stomach up, but it should have illuminated us all. Yeah. It didn't. Likewise, I didn't even see it hit Pete. I'm looking at Chris. I can't take my eyes off what I'm looking at. So we got that visitation, and we kind of said it between ourselves, but not to Pete, because Pete were going through treatment for, a bad illness. And we all said, I think that was for Pete. I don't know why we thought that.
And Pete's a skeptic, I think you said.
Not after that, but right. He looks for logic. We all look for it, Jay. I think we've got to do. You are involved in this subject as much as I am. Coley is. Yeah. Everybody in chat is, everybody who watches this afterwards, but we've got to remain grounded and accept the fact that not everything's unexplained phenomena. That's what we've got to do. But that just blew us away. We can, if we go up there now, I don't know, till we stop going up there, we know that we've seen loads of light form phenomena. We've seen things close to us in the field, lights, flashes of light, lights under the sea. But this was with us. This, we're actually there with us. I found that spectacular. Since then, we've had fixed cameras on ourselves. We've bought night vision cameras, and I put 2 on a tripod. I have one facing away and one facing us. Linny has one facing us. We've got cameras fixed on us now. How sad is that? We've not been lucky since. You know what I mean? But
that's nuts. But that's how they did this phenomenon.
1962, another one. 1962 here as well. Yeah. Bamora.
What is, if there was a standalone event that you yourself have experienced, something that's made the hairs genuinely stand up on the back of your neck? Is there any one account that stands out from the rest?
I think the things from childhood, they'll just never leave. And they were so frightening. And I don't mean I'm not frightened now. That would be wrong. I like to think to myself, because I want it to happen again now, you know. I want to face that fear. And maybe when it happens, maybe I'll just be that little boy again who were absolutely terrified, who wet the bed till he were 14 years old. Yeah. Because I was so frightened. But the point is, it's never happened. It happened in 1998. So let me just draw back. It happened in childhood. I reckon I'd have been 4 or 5 years old till about 14. Then it stopped. Yeah. Or I think it stopped. I don't recall waking up and seeing them. And then it's when we moved here back in 1993. So there's a big gap then. And we'd got 4 girls. And you know what? It started straight away. It started. It's almost like your life's panned out and mapped out for you, because there'd been that big gap. We'd probably moved house 3 times. You know, I'd been married and moved house, and then we moved here, and it started straight away. I came to this property, this huge Victorian home, and I were having to make it habitable for us. Yeah, for marrying girls at first, and I'd be coming up on a weekend as well as doing my job. And Sarah, eldest daughter, Laura's sister, who's still in chat, here, Laura, and she'd help me. I don't know how old she was. I think she'd be about 10 or 11, and I'd get plumber in, and we'd get hot water on and that. So we were sleeping in this property. Even the property, Jay, even the property had an history. Which I don't know if we've got time to go into that, but I'm sleeping in property. Old beds were in property and everything. We'd put bedding on them. And I was sleeping on a mattress on floor. And Sarah's at the side of me. And this is before we'd moved in. Yeah. And we'd heard noises. We heard big bangs downstairs and all sorts of noises. And this house at the time, now I've converted it to flats now, you could look down from the top floors and you could see down into the hallway to the ground floor. Big winding oak mahogany staircase that went all the way up, which will make sense in a moment. So I'm laid there on this mattress in night, and I'm facing the door, which is now Bob Brown's flat, funnily enough. Yeah, yeah. And I'm looking onto these spindles, which are mahogany, beautiful mahogany spindles, you know, wooden stair rods. And I woke up and I thought, I've painted them white. And I looked and I thought, well, no, I haven't. And I looked round at Sarah, and she's asleep. And then they became like fluorescent tubes. They were so white. They were just glowing. Yeah. And I'm watching it. And now all I remembered, when I wrote Night People, I thought, deep dive, I'm going to remember more. And I only remembered two things, Night People. One, that it were autumn when I had an experience, because I remember kicking leaves, which I'd forgot, never remembered, which is sad, really. That's all I remembered. And this, they went like fluorescent tubes. And from the landing, I could see beings. They were just coming up. But they weren't like what were in childhood. It almost looked like a nativity scene. And it weren't biblical. I'm not trying to throw it. But it looked, everything were luster. They were there. And then everything, bang, it was just explosion of light. And I woke up and it was morning. And I've experiences. If I don't gather them, or my experiences told me, if I don't remember fairly quick after, they've gone. And I've no memory of it when I woke up. No memory. And the sun's pouring through the window. There's no curtains up, and we're up at really high up, these big Victorian houses. She didn't need curtains. And I said to Sarah, I said, well, we'll work till dinner, Sarah, and then we'll go home to your mum and your sisters. And I just went like that. And my arms were peppered in holes. And I mean, there were lots of holes in my arms, like somebody had took a match and burnt holes in them. And as soon as I saw them, I remembered that.
Like scoop marks, or
no, they were burns. No.
Wow. I've heard that happens with demonic things. Do you think it was mimicking, Paul?
Maybe, Coley. Here's the thing: when we moved in, there's if you can, anybody watching this can Google this man, Reverend Tom Willis. He was the official exorcist in all of our area, and he knocked on the door and he says, "New people have moved in. I'd like to bless the house." And I sort of, I don't know, how old am I? I'm 28-year-old or 30-year-old, I don't know. And I let him in, and he was a nice guy. You can find him on, he's passed away now, but you find a lot about Reverend Tom Willis. They even made documentaries about him. And he's going around the house, and then he says, I wouldn't let your children sleep in this room, which is top bedroom. And our Sarah's there going, because it was her room. And I says, look, I think you're going to have to leave. I didn't know Sarah had followed us upstairs. And I weren't nasty to him. He was a nice guy, but I said, all you're doing is frightening kids. Don't bother. So he'd gone. So, but when we stripped the wallpaper off, there were pentagrams on wall. All sorts of it was festooned. When we lifted the floorboards, Laura's listening. Laura knows all of this. When we lifted the floorboards,
she's just said she's in it now in her 30s.
The floorboards, there'd be a page of the Bible. You know, where the light fittings, wires would go, you'd lift another floorboard and there'd be a Saint Christopher. It was just festooned with such a protection all around the staircase. It's a huge staircase, or it was, because it's altered now and it's flat. So you're thinking like 5 meters by 4 meters that went from top to bottom, But there were little gargoyles, little bronze or brass gargoyles pinned to the wall all the way around. Which we took off. We found bags and bags, literally hundreds and hundreds of spirit letters. And some they'd been holding, I think the kindest way to say it is they'd been holding seances there.
Yeah.
But, and loads of automatic writing, which made no sense to me. I had no idea what I was looking at. And we burnt tons of it, tons and tons of it. Well, maybe I should have kept some, it'd been interesting. And incidentally, when I talked about the wounds, I've got all my medical records, And, where the doctors are saying we're perplexed by these punch hole lesions. Because you talked about, the scoop marks, they were burns. But later in 1994 to 1998, we're perplexed by the punch hole lesions that keep appearing on this young man's body. That's what they said back then. They won't say it now, would they? Every 3 to 6 months. So I'd be going at doctors. They hadn't a clue what were happening. I knew. I didn't tell them. I'd have had some kind of, what would they have said? His mental health issues or whatever. That's the tag you'd have had attached to you, I think.
Yeah, absolutely, mate.
So,
that made the hair stand up on my arms. What Laura was saying in chat, which I was leading to, is she's now in her 30s. I know Paul's daughters, but she said that tale and what that man said still terrifies her to this day.
Yeah. The Laura, they've all experienced things in property. All of them. They've all experienced them.
Really?
The least, Gemma, to be honest, who had the growl at the back of her head, but the others, they've all experienced the strangeness. Yeah.
Wow. That's quite unnerving, isn't it, to think about when it starts affecting your family.
Absolutely.
Especially the kids. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I wanted to, I'm conscious of time, Paul, and it's late for you. I just want to move quickly on to a few Wolflands questions, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go on then.
So after years of researching, you mentioned that this goes back, sometimes centuries with the Flixton werewolf and that. Do you still believe these are flesh and blood animals, or are you thinking that it's something more fleeting and maybe interdimensional?
Into a difficult one, because obviously look at the vast expanses of forests that you've got overseas and Alaska, and you think, maybe something could have survived. But the forest that I'm talking about, even the North Yorkshire Moors National Park, 525 square miles.
Yeah,
I still don't think that there's something physical living there permanently. I think that it's something that just has the ability, and I could be wrong, to slip in and out of our existence. When you look at the attributes that these creatures are said to have, the self-bioluminescent eyes. When Jimmy and Steve saw that creature in Broxer Forest, they said its eyes lit up in the darkness. No torch, no light on them. Self-bioluminescent eyes.
And how big were these eyes, Paul?
Jimmy said, and exact words, he went, I couldn't think of a creature to assign these eyes to. And he held his fist out, he says, and they were huge. And huge amber eyes, human-shaped, glowing in the darkness. But then you listen to other people talking about the way these things move. And they move as though they're on a conveyor belt. They glide. I've had people talking about mountain bikers racing through the forest, and at the side of them, 30 foot away, where you've got all the divots and the rocks, the fallen trees, this thing is as though it's on some kind of film track. just going down at the side of them. They don't conform to anything that we could understand sort of the mechanics of in the animal kingdom. That everything's sort of, they talk about them going up the sides of hills at the same speed that they're running on the flat, keeping up with cars 45, 50 mile an hour. There's not, I don't think that they're a true flesh and blood animal that resides anywhere. But what do I know? There'll be somebody out there that doesn't agree, and I'm quite happy to say, let's agree to disagree. I've spoken to American Indians, and and one namely, I think they've used him on Skinwalker, and I think I put George Knapp onto him. I can't remember, called Larry Sespooch.
Yeah, Larry Sespooch. Yeah,
and I used to speak to Larry quite a lot because I was interested in the Flixton werewolf and the potential that we were looking at a Skinwalker. And Larry would say that what they would term as the Skinwalkers, you'd get no harm from these things if you went into their locations with good intent.
Right.
And I can't profess to have as much knowledge as this man. He said, but you went into the location or where these things were with good intent, and that's the kind of experience you would have. But he said they'd got the ability to live between worlds, and when they were in our sphere of existence, he didn't say that. Then they had to eat, they had to breathe. Potentially, they could be killed. So, but how the mechanics of being able to slip from one sphere of existence to another works, I don't know. All I'm saying is my gut feeling is that they're not here all of the time. Danes Dyke, there's that little woodland, could not contain what people are claiming to see. No way.
No. And also the food source for something that heavily muscled, 7 to 8 feet tall. I know you sort of mentioned the sheep even before, and the mutilations, but
the amount of
surely you'd be seeing the throat ripped out.
The amount of calories that these creatures would need would be immense. Let's assume you need 3,500 calories a day. I think it's about 2,700 to maintain your body weight. We're looking at something 500 to 1,000 pound. It would need 10,000 calories a day. Then you look at the body shape of the Bigfoot. It's endomorphic. So like mesomorphic is the athlete, ectomorphic is the skinny marathon runner. These things are endomorphic. They look like lumps of lard. You can see that they're huge and they're muscular, but they're not sort of lean and muscular, are they? In most instances,
no.
They don't look like they're built for the speeds that people say that these things can attain. So everything kind of rubs against the grain, and the ability to just seemingly just vanish. How does that work? The people talk about them going behind a tree that's probably a foot or 2 foot wide, and it don't come out at the other side. How does that work? It's crazy.
It makes no sense, does it? And how do you apply rationale to something?
It's difficult, isn't it? And for everybody's argument and thoughts on this, you're going to get other people that just don't agree. But I think that's good. I think it's great. It just makes for good debate, doesn't it?
The one thing I'd like to add is, the part of the UK which you come from, people aren't forthcoming. They don't want to come forward. They don't welcome outsiders in that neck of the woods.
I've got stories that I know that are out there. I've got accounts and encounters and not just cryptid related, UFO related, even kind of poltergeist related, where they're not going to talk to me. And I know all about it. You know what I mean? And there were an elderly couple got abducted on cliff tops. I knew their son. I got to talk to them once. These are people they'll be in their 80s now. And I got to talk to them once. They'll never speak again. I only got to talk to him because he told me about it and I managed to get round. Because this old lady talking about being immersed in a flash of light and then coming to in a room. That were totally alien, will use that word, to anything she knows, and having procedures done on her. Can you imagine that? It's crazy.
Holy crap. I just wanted you to briefly mention the role that obviously RAF Benton plays in this, where obviously comparisons to Skinwalker Ranch, it's the whole Uinta Basin, and Skinwalker Ranch seems to be the epicenter. it seems to be a lot of activity around RAF Bempton. Can you tell us what it was originally for?
RAF Bempton, the radar station, it came in 1940. It came to Flamborough at first, and then within that year it went to Bempton, and then it became a Type 1 rotor, which is an underground facility. And I'm not so sure, to be honest, Jay, that the former RAF base is the epicenter. I dare say that there's a lot of stories attached to it, and if you could get in touch with some of those, it's closed in 1968, 1970, military personnel, you'd find more out. But I think Speeton, which is a mile away, is the place where the epicenter of this phenomena would be. I really do think Speeton would be the epicenter, Jay. But the base, I mean, there's lots of things being reported around the base over the years, and back in when it closed in the 1970, it was used by a satanic cult, allegedly.
Yeah,
and there's all the evidence down below ground of all the satanic graffiti and paintings and pornography. Allegedly, there were a lot of stuff went off there. But now you've mentioned the base, just for anybody that's listening to it or who's in the UK, I need to say that base is completely out of bounds. It's concreted over. There's no way you can get into it. I don't recommend anybody going on the land. There's livestock on it. And that's, I've got to say that because it's
privately owned land now, isn't it?
Privately owned, yeah.
But wasn't it some correlation with Bempton? It was a precursor for HARP.
No, what Bempton did, they were experimenting. I think 2 times in its operational life, it were an experimental radar station. And Project Winkle's the one I'm most familiar with. Funny name, isn't it?
Yeah.
And there's talk that it were a precursor for over the horizon radar, or it were along those lines. But I don't know enough about it to go into great detail.
Yeah.
But I know that when they were experimenting with Project Winkle and doing that kind of work, they were the enemy detection signals. They were homing in on the enemy's detection signals. If you can see us, we can see you, kind of thing. I wish I had more knowledge on that for you, Jay.
Yeah, no worries. I it's just obviously there's so much folklore around that base. As you say, equally there's as much going on at Speeton.
I think there's more going on at Speeton. You see, the thing is, it gets no footfall. It's the highest part of the cliffs. It's the most treacherous part. And I'm putting a film on tomorrow night at 7:00 about an experience that we had at Speeton a few months ago. That's on the Truth Proof live stream. And so guys, if anybody wants to listen to it, have a look. A lot of my listeners, not my listeners, people who listen to Truth Proof will be watching it anyway. But that's quite interesting. But you get lots of reports from Speeton, which you think, why would you get reports from a place where hardly anybody ever visits? It's a tiny village. But when you get on those cliff tops at night, there's nothing. There's nobody about. So, I think that's the epicenter.
Wow, that's it's quite remarkable, the sheer amount of stuff. Would you say, because I know we've spoken about this kind of privately, that the more, because you've been at this a long time, 26 years, did you say before?
What, talking about the phenomena openly?
Yeah, or research, your own research and whatnot. And it seems to be that, like you're up on the cliff tops, 3-4 times a week. And
we get all over, or in forests of North Yorkshire. I've spent quite a bit of time up there. I think you've got to put yourself in those locations. What I say is, when we go there, we're not necessarily expecting anything to happen. I just think that you have a higher probability in these locations based on the reports that have come into me over the years. Where did you see that? I saw it at Bempton. We're driving, I don't know, from Scarborough to Bridlington, and I saw these strange lights. Where? Over Bempton, over Speeton. Yeah, the fishermen. We saw strange lights hovering around the cliffs. Where were you? We were looking onto Bempton Cliffs. We were looking at Speeton. You sort of go where the evidence leads you, and we've gravitated to this eastern North Yorkshire coastline. But it's not unique. I mean, I think that a lot of researchers underestimate their areas of research, perhaps, and want to look at, say, East Yorkshire, because I think it's there. I think it's everywhere. If we look for it, it's there.
Yeah, it is.
You know?
Well, you know, we've got one on the doorstep just over the border in North Wales, Denbigh. Famously, you know, you've got Denbigh Asylum, and that, if you go back to the early 1800s, there's Dogman or werewolf sightings.
Yeah, there you go.
There's a guy who's not even into anything remotely to do with UFOs or UAP. And I managed to track him down. He won't go on record, but he's been in the Daily Post, which is like our Welsh tabloid newspaper. And he's captured the most amazing flying saucer pictures.
It's crazy, isn't it?
You know, this isn't a guy who's a fantasist or after any sort of attention or acclaim or celebrity. Yet, you know, A seems to connect to B and B seems to connect to C. Just before we close, something I obviously wanted to mention was the old map that you found that actually didn't it sort of bring up there was a magnetic anomaly in the sea?
Well, it's a lot of the older maritime maps will show up a magnetic anomaly, but what it doesn't say there is one. It says a magnetic anomaly is said to exist in this location, which is you've got a thing called the Bempton Fault. I'm no geologist, so I can't really tell you loads of detail about it, but I know that there's more shipwrecks off the Bempton and Flamborough coast than anywhere else in the UK.
Right.
And in older times, the old steam screw trawlers. I think I'm going to say that wrong. God, that's a mouthful.
Twister.
And other vessels have come to grief, and people have reported magnetic anomalies. The compass, they thought that they were well away from the rocks because they're treacherous around Flamborough and Bempton, and they've come to grief on the rocks, and it shows up in the books. I mean, whether it's been a magnetic anomaly that's created that, I don't know. There's a fisherman that got, I think it were 1.5 hours of advanced time, taking people taking party of fishing anglers out to a place called the Ten Wrecks.
Wow.
And they set off from Bridlington Harbour. I haven't got the details to give you the hours, but the danger is when you say hours, and if you've already talked about it, somebody jumps all over you. Say, he said it took him 3 hours, and before he said it took him 4. It's hard to remember everything, but basically they got to their fishing ground 1.5 hours early, and when they got to the fishing ground, because he'd had
that's mind blowing.
Oh yeah, and I know fisherman, I know him well, and very well, and he'd had a sleep on Wheelhouse, and his son took the fishing guys out. He were there, but he had a sleep. And his dad woke his dad up. He says, "We're here." He says, "What do you mean we're here?" He says, "We're here."
Wow.
He says, everything were golden. Everything were golden. The sea were like oil.
Yeah.
So it was just a surreal. The radar wouldn't work. The radio wouldn't work. He said, "I thought we were in eye of an hurricane." He said, so really surreal. We're going to have to do this again, Jay. And
absolutely, buddy.
And I'll get into
it. So I just want to leave you with one question. If obviously the current discourse, we're talking about disclosure, the release of the 146 pages of new data coming out the other day. If Paul Sinclair was to see all these files tomorrow and, disclosure happens, what would you be the first question that you would ask in relation to this?
If disclosure, and it were true disclosure, and it revealed that, let's say from 1947, they knew about the visitation, the visitations and the abductions. Maybe they couldn't have done anything about it. Maybe it'd been too terrifying to tell the public. But if they knew about this, and then they've knowingly allowed these beings of unknown origin to take children, to subject them to absolute horror. And I'm saying this, and potentially they might not have been able to do anything about it, but I'd be wanting to know how long they'd been in receipt of this knowledge. That's what I've not where they come from, but you know what I mean. Those questions would follow, but I'd want to know how long that they'd known about this, and all those poor people that some have gone to the grave with the knowing and been made to look that big for voicing their beliefs and their experiences, and there's a party, a body of people out there that have known all along and said nothing. That's a big question.
That's a really good answer, to be fair, and something obviously you're qualified to say, but and it's part of this that is quite disturbing, that we all of us want this UFO disclosure. It seems like we've been advocating and campaigning for this for the longest time. But is it really wise to open all of Pandora's box and let all these secrets out?
It might be too frightening. Be careful what you wish for,
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
I just want to thank you for coming on, buddy. As I say, your work is second to none. Boots on the ground research, as I call it. I want to thank you for your service to our community and all the work that you put out. Where can people find you if they want to, say, buy a book or a documentary or find out a little bit more about you?
Okay, so you can get the books on truthproof.uk. I think Coley's maybe put some links in anyway. You can get the Kindle versions on Amazon.
Okay.
You can also get the books on eBay, and you can also get Wolflands, which is the DVD, on Amazon Prime, obviously as a download, or you can buy it as a DVD. We didn't think anybody would want them, but there's loads of scope for DVDs. Usually, anybody buys anything, if I got to order tonight, it'll be in post tomorrow. That's how I work it, and that's about it. And the Truth Proof live stream every Sunday, 7 o'clock. We get a brilliant following. There's 400 or 500 people in chat. It's just brilliant, and it's your live stream, guys, as well. I say it every week, just like Coley, Jay. It's this. You're putting this out for the people, aren't you?
Yeah. And you take questions when you're doing the live stream. You put it in chat.
Yeah, absolutely.
Brilliant, mate. I'd like to thank you for your time and sort of staying up late with me here in the UK.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much, Paul. It's been a pleasure. Everybody said welcome back. I mean, you've been absolutely amazing, and I loved your answer. But yes, awesome.
The thing is as well, we're a bit more. I don't mean there's no planning, because it's great. We've just run through it, but there's certain cases that you've asked me about. I'd have probably had a look and thought, we'll give you the dates, I'll give you the specifics of this. So I like to do that. I like to be accurate with dates. So but great. I've enjoyed speaking to you both. Thank you.
Yes, and we'll be in touch. Thank you again. Yeah, he's absolutely amazing. But I have to get you out of here. I apologize. For some reason, my screen just kind of got wonky here, but we'll let you go, Paul. Thank you. Oh, wow. He's absolutely amazing, Jay. Absolutely amazing. I mean, I followed his work and everything, but just to hear some of that is absolutely,
there's just so much, isn't there? And especially to cram into what, 2 and a bit hours is, it's teardrop in an ocean, isn't it? I suppose. But what gets me is the level of detail and the level of self-sacrifice that Paul makes. 63, 64 years old. Forgive me if I've added a year onto his age, but to be getting up every morning, 4 a.m., 5 a.m., up on those cliff tops. And I think what a lot of the viewers outside of the UK don't sort of understand is how barren the conditions are up there and how isolated you are. It's, if you go up there wintertime and the wind's howling and the weather's kind of coming in, it is absolutely brutal. I've been up there myself.
Wow.
So I think, his dedication to this, and to be fair to Paul, I know he makes a little bit from selling books and whatnot. He's not a millionaire off doing this by any stretch of the imagination. And as you've heard tonight, he won't over sensationalize something to make it sound grandiose or, bigger than what it actually is. You're going to get and even sometimes, like Paul said, you have to apply rationale to a lot of this stuff. So, it's just, I massively appreciate his work. And, not only as someone who's sort of mentoring me and, helping my understanding as I sort of mature with my years in looking into this phenomenon. So, yeah, massive.
Yeah, that's awesome. And we had, I mean, for we didn't release this obviously for a little bit, but we have 330 live, which is pretty good. I mean, for time wise, I'm saying too for the future.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was absolutely wonderful. He really was.
Yeah, I think someone said part 2 for sure. So
Yes,
yeah,
yes. Oh, well,
maybe in the
definitely
future
part two.
we can get him back on and prepare him. I kind of dropped all these questions. I did give him some pre-warning of what some of the
Oh, it was
questions would be,
wonderful. I've learned so
but
much. I like sat back. I was like, wow, just absorbing it all.
I could
I
just
loved
see
his
you in
take
awe
on
at
it.
times. Sorry, you didn't get a word in edgeways much tonight.
No,
I
no, no.
apologize.
I was sitting. I really, honestly, it was so great to see, and you
Yeah,
know him, and I learned so much, and I loved his whole perspective on it. I could
yeah,
relate so much to it. So I mean, it was wonderful. It really was.
it was great, and I hope your listeners really enjoyed it as well.
They
And
did. They
you
did.
know,
Everybody did.
as I say, I think I say this every time that I've been on. If you like this, please like, share, comment. It's the biggest thing you can do for Coley's channel and my own work and these conversations we're having is, this net needs to get out to more people, in my opinion.
It does too, and it's not gonna unless people are sharing it. Unfortunately,
Yeah.
it's like the algorithm doesn't hit it, so it is definitely important to. And Jay, tell them too where they can find you.
So Anomaly Archives on Facebook, X or Twitter and Instagram, and just Jay Austin under my personal profile. I do post bits and pieces as I get it in relation to, ufology or the phenomenon. As you've heard tonight, I've got a lot of interest similar to what Paul's is. It's always multi-phenomenon, and I think, and Paul touched upon this, and I'll say this in closing, is there's a lot of segregation. You've got like your Bigfoot guys, you've got your ghosty guys, you've got your UFO guys. Isn't it time that we kind of like suspend our prejudices against one another and start working together on this stuff?
Yes, yes, preach it. Yes.
You know?
It's so true. It is so true. And I was talking to I'm like the crypto I'm like, you have a great community. And Pops who's on here, he's the one that said, we're all a part of,
Yeah,
we go and we see, and it's true. It's so much of this connects. And
yeah,
until we start connecting, we're not going to be able to put those pieces together.
exactly. Yeah.
Awesome. But yes, so you can find Jay's going to be on Thursday. I will update if anything changes with the time. Did you want to do like 4 p.m. next week, or just we'll decide on that and I can put it out,
Yeah,
release it?
yeah, 4 p.m. works next week.
All right. Well, look for Jay. He'll be over here on Thursday, 4 p.m.
Watch this
Central
space.
Standard Time. Yeah. And then hopefully we can get it situated because I love the UK. You guys hold such a huge piece of this, and the time is definitely a barrier. But I can make Thursdays earlier work. That does not work,
Yeah,
not a problem at all. So,
yeah.
yep.
Let's keep doing this. We can roll with it and see where it takes us.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So again, thank you for taking the journey into the unknown. I'm Coley, also known as ColeyUFO, and Jay Austin, who is here on Thursdays. And we want to thank you for listening with an open heart and open mind. And we will be seeing you all very soon.
Cool.
He's the alien, UFOs in the night.